Ladies, gentlemen, and divas of all ages, whether you were a fan of the original Aion, or if you've never heard of it before, it was an exceptionally innovative MMO that first released for most of the world in 2009, and the first MMO to really just sort of go all in on the idea of allowing the player to fly, which was probably the most unique thing that the game had around it, and was something that started to become more popular in other MMOs and just games in general afterwards as well. That said, we're not here to talk about the original Aion today, but that context is important because what we are here for is its upcoming sequel, Aion 2. Over the last couple of weeks, we've started to have actual gameplay for this game trickling out, some of which I apologize in a really weird screen from a video they put out just recently. They just framed it very oddly, but the point is that we are finally seeing actual gameplay footage of what Aion 2 will look like, and so with that, I wanted to sit down and go over everything that we know so far about Aion 2. First things first, early in its development cycle, this game was being created as a mobile game as the main focus, and the story was set 2,000 years in the past before the original game's story. And so the original faction split was gone, the eylos and the asmodians, and everything that went with that, but at some point along the many years of development for this game that has happened so far, there was a pretty major shift in how they decided to do things. It was changed to being a focus on PC for development as their main platform, rather than mobile. So for anyone worried it's just going to be a mobile game that is ported to PC, that is seemingly not the case. It will be a PC game that will eventually be ported to mobile. The gameplay in the footage that we actually have is quite telling as well, as there is just way too much precision being shown here for mobile gameplay, really. So they've said PC is their focus for development, and then they will adjust it for a mobile version or maybe even for consoles after the fact after release. On top of that, the story has also been readjusted due to the outcry from the existing fanbase, and now it will instead be taking place 200 years after the original Aion story, with the faction still being a core part of the whole thing. That said, the developers have stated that this is essentially going to be what their original vision was for the first Aion. They had a lot of ideas and concepts that they wanted to implement into that game that they couldn't because the technology at the time just was not strong enough to make it happen. But now, with the modern power of the Unreal Engine 5, they've been able to bring something to life that is far, far closer to what they originally wanted and envisioned for the first game, with far more dynamic movement while flying, without having the same issues and restrictions with terrain or just limited movement space. And the idea is if you can see it in the game, you should be able to go to it now. They've also put a lot of effort into redesigning the combat system, and it seems like it will end up being some sort of mix between tab targeting, cooldown style combat, and action combat with active blocking type mechanics on top. On launch, there will be 8 classes that you can choose between, all of which are returning from the first Aion. The Gladiator and the Templar as your 2 tank style classes, with Gladiator being a more based around lifesteal type of tank and being a more midway point between a pure tank and a DPS, whereas Templar will be much more full shield, wall level tank. Assassin is all about burst damage, backstab, stealth, and then the Ranger is of course your ranged DPS style archetype focused around a bow rather than magic, which of course does bring us to our 2 magic damaging classes as well. The Sorcerer, which is all about big, flashy, explosive magic. And importantly, it's worth mentioning that in original Aion, one of the cooler parts was that each individual spell had its own different voice lines and the effects were awesome, so I've got high hopes for the magic in this game as well. Spirit Master is a summoning focused class, managing little guys to help you out, and then we have our 2 main support classes, which for proper healing is the Cleric, but then there's also an extremely unique class among all games in general, which is the Chanter, and if it's anything like the first game, this one will be quite cool, being an almost bard style archetype focused around chanting mantras to apply buffs of various kinds to your allies, which is quite neat as well. As far as the content that will be in the game, like the original one, there will be both a PvE and PvP side to it, with the PvE side looking absolutely massive as of this point, with the game's open world itself being 36 times bigger than the original Aion map, according to the developers. They've also said that there are currently over 200 dungeons between open world dungeons and instance dungeons, which is a pretty crazy amount of dungeons for a game that isn't even in beta yet. Though that comes with a caveat that we know at least some of these dungeons are going to be returning ones from the first Aion, so don't expect literally everything to be completely brand new if you are someone who played the original. But of course it will be new for you if you're someone who didn't, and 200 is still quite a lot of variety to work with either way. As for PvP, with them rearranging the game and the plans to allow the Eylos and Asmodian factions to still exist, there will once again be faction war style PvP in the game, there should be open world PvP still as well, and we've had confirmation that rifts will exist again in Aion 2. And in the original Aion, these were quite innovative as another part of the game, being portals that can open up in one faction zone that leads to the other faction zone around the same level. So let's say that you're an Eylos leveling up in an Eylos zone, you can take this rift to go over to the Asmodian zone of the same level, almost like you're in a spy mission where you are sent over to infiltrate and get as much PvP in as you can, kill as many players as you can, before you are eventually defeated and sent back to your original zone, the one that you are supposed to be in. So even just that feature existing again in a more modern setting could be really cool, especially with the updated combat system in general, the improvements to the flight system, and hey, we've also had confirmation of a mount system in Aion 2 as well, and everything like this does just look very intriguing to me. One thing of note is that they've also split up these servers so that each faction will have their own servers separate from each other. It'll be interesting, as a result, to see how these can link up and work together for the purposes of open world PvP, as an example, but on a similar note to this, they have also said one of their big improvements for Aion 2 is that the matchmaking will pull from players of all servers that share the same faction. So instead of only trying to group with people from your own server, you can find players who share your faction, even if they are on different servers. This will make the game's player base feel a lot bigger in comparison to how it would feel otherwise. And as a result, just between these things, of course, well, this might change as we get more information about the game, but right now it's looking like they're spending a lot more time and effort on sort of focusing on the PvE side of the game rather than the PvP side. The next big main thing to touch on, though, is the release date window that we currently have, and right now it's looking like the initial release of the game will happen late this year in the back half of 2025 in Korea specifically, with it then having a delayed release to the rest of the world in 2026. So if you're in the West like I am, you're probably waiting to 2026. And that's something that I wish just happened less in gaming in general, but hey, it is what it is. Finally then, before we end here, I do want to make sure that I give the big disclaimer about this game, which is that while I am excited by the gameplay and I am interested in what this game could be, in its potential, and in what we've been shown so far, honestly, it all does look pretty good, but there is still a pretty reasonable concern about what the game's monetization model will be until we actually know more information about it. The original Aion was beloved for years after its 2009 release, before in 2012 the game went to a free-to-play model and became more and more monetized over the years, until it just became a really nasty pay-to-win system that I would personally never recommend to anyone. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that caveat, that at least in my opinion, if Aion 2 wants to be successful, it needs to avoid that free-to-play but pay-to-win style model. So far, the developers have actually responded about comments about pay-to-win, and their specific response has been that they will minimize pay-to-win features as much as possible in Aion 2. Now, that is a translation from Korean, so it may not be perfectly accurate, it may not have been that exact set of words they wanted to use, but to me that sounds a bit like a half commitment to me for now. Something like, there might be some pay-to-win, but it won't be as bad as the first game. And if that's what they meant, I do find that a little bit concerning, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt for now. It could be a translation error, and I'll just say for now, until we see more information, we just don't know for real what the monetization model will be like. So I'm really hopeful that it stays away from pay-to-win entirely, not just mostly, but entirely, so that we can all just enjoy the game for the actual gameplay itself. That just about does it for today then, everyone. A roundup on everything going on with Aion 2, with the recent drops of gameplay and interviews and information from the developers after years and years of mostly just rumors about the game being spread throughout the internet. And now we are starting to get much more of a picture of what this game will look like. I'd love to hear your thoughts about Aion 2 so far down in the comments, especially from those of you who have played a lot of the first Aion as well. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.